Okay, it's part two of our notes on the nitrogen cycle. We've looked at lightning, lichen, and legumes fixing nitrogen from the sky. We saw how that nitrate, that useful form of nitrogen, went back into plants through assimilation. And we left off with scat. Yes, that's right. I'll say it one more time. It starts with an S, it ends with a T. It comes out of you, it comes out of me. I know what you're thinking, but it's not that. Let's be scientific and call it scat. Well, this form of nitrogen is actually quite harmful to the soil. Have you ever seen where a dog is pooped or peed and you see a brown spot in the grass later? Well, that's because this form of nitrogen that's within scat or urine is what we call ammonia, okay? So NH3 is also known as ammonia or ammonium, okay, with NH4 plus. But we're just going to focus on ammonia. And what happens with ammonia, it's quite toxic, so it needs to be converted, okay? And there's a mini cycle below the soil that takes place to convert it, okay? So we're going to draw kind of a big picture here, or a big circle, and we're going to talk about this process. So we'll start with NH3 plus, it's an ion, and that ammonia, NH3, it needs to be converted. Okay, it needs to be converted into something else more useful. NO2 is what we call nitrite. Okay, so go ahead and write nitrite. Okay, and that's also pretty toxic. Nitrite. Okay, and then when it converts, we now have oxygen groups on our nitrogen. Okay, and that again is toxic. Now, how that converts is through a special type of bacteria. Okay, so write bacteria below the soil do the work to convert that, okay? But then from there, there's another type of bacteria that makes another transformation. So write bacteria again, do the heavy lifting to take that toxic form of nitrogen, nitrite, and make it into a nitrate, okay? And this is, again, like we said before, nitrate is a healthy form of nitrogen, okay? And that nitrate can be useful in assimilation. So nitrate can be useful to be assimilated back into the roots of plants, okay? So this happens in the soil, and you might say, well, don't you see farmers using manure to fertilize their soil? Yes, but once they lay that down, this process begins. And by the way, this process is very important to write the name of this process. This is called nitrification, okay? Nitrification. Very important process, okay? Below the soil, we have this mini cycle, okay, where ammonia is going to ammonia is going to nitrite to nitrate, and that pays dividends for our soil because these two forms of nitrogen are not useful to the soil as far as growing, but this form is. Nitrate is what we want. Okay, so that process will happen fairly quickly in the soil as the bacteria convert it from ammonia to nitrite to nitrate, and that helps as well. Okay, so kind of as we go from there, we want to talk about other ways of putting nitrogen into the ground. So other ways that nitrogen can go into the ground would be through fertilizer. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go to my next page here. In farming, we know oftentimes, and again, I'm just going to draw a mini picture here of a tractor. Okay, you don't have to have a perfect drawing, but I do like to put diagrams in my notes. So if you feel like your tractor, and again, it's hard because I'm awkward because I'm going across 2 pages here, but of course, other forms of nitrogen can be applied through fertilizers. Okay, so I'm just going to draw basically a cartoonish tractor here. And we've got in this let's say on the back here we've got something that's spreading nitrogen. Okay, and that nitrogen, that commercial nitrogen, is kind of fixed from the sky too. There's a process that a German scientist used to create usable nitrogen, and it's called the Haber-Bosch process. Okay, so atmospheric nitrogen, and this actually happens during the war. The Germans were experimenting with TNT, and what do you think the N in TNT stands for? Well, it's nitrogen. Okay, we're looking at nitroglycerin, explosive materials used to make dynamite were used, and after the war they realized that they had all this nitrogen and it could be useful for fertilizers. Okay, so synthetic fertilizer. Okay, so nitrogen became synthetic fertilizer through this process, the Haber-Bosch process. And it's still explosive. Making that fertilizer is explosive, and there have been plants that make fertilizer actually have explosions before because of the explosive nature in the process. So by spreading that fertilizer on a field, we get nitrogen into the soil. Okay, so that's laid down, and that benefits our crops. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also talk about how nitrogen occurs in an aquatic ecosystem. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and draw a little slope here, and we're going to draw like a pond going down into the water here. And just to show that it's a pond, I'm going to draw, and this could be a creek or a lake or whatever, but I just want to share with you that the nitrogen cycle occurs there as well. So, of course, we have fish in our pond, and they defecate as well and release ammonia, NH3, and that ammonia is converted, NH3, okay, ammonia. I'm kind of going from right to left this time with my process, is converted to nitrite. And we check these in our fish tanks all the time. If you're an aquarist or someone that owns an aquarium, you know that you have to check for these levels, ammonia to nitrite to nitrate, okay? And that's also known as Same process here below the surface of the water. This is called nitrification, okay? Nitrification. So this nitrate will help plants to grow. Okay, so I'm going to just show some aquatic plants kind of growing, seaweeds or kelps or whatever, you know, depending on what type of system we have, plants will grow because of nitrates. Okay, so that's healthy for an aquatic ecosystem. Okay, and again, forgive my rudimentary drawings here. Draw some more fish. Okay, but what happens oftentimes is the unfortunate nature of this, and I drew this tractor on purpose next to our aquatic ecosystem because we also get, when it rains, we can get what's called runoff, okay? And runoff is when we have a bunch of chemicals or sediment that ends up in our aquatic ecosystem, okay? And because runoff occurs, we can get an overabundance of nutrients, okay? We get an overabundance of nitrogen or nutrients. In this case, we're going to say nitrogen because we're dealing with the nitrogen cycle. And because of that, and that term is called eutrophication. Eutrophication. Okay, eutrophication, where we have too many nutrients. And what happens is, because, and we've done some algae labs in my class, because we have so much algae, the algae starts to build up. It really starts to grow to a point that there's like a mat of algae growing on the top of the water, okay? And because of that, no sunlight, okay, so I'm going to just draw the sun up here. This is probably a low sun in the sky. Could have drawn it higher, but the sun sometimes can be lower in the sky, and it'll actually prevent, light cannot get through, so it blocks the sunlight, and because of that, the plants down here will die, okay? And because the plants are all dying, I'm just going to say death down here. Because the plants die, the oxygen levels go down, okay? So, right, O2 levels go down, okay? And because the oxygen levels are going down, then the fish die, okay? And so when these oxygen levels go down, we call that hypoxia. Hypoxia, okay? And that is detrimental to our ecosystem. So when you see these eutrophied ponds, ones that have a big mat of algae, and I think I took my class out to see one this year, there's a huge mat of algae of the pond, and the oxygen levels were so low due to hypoxia, and everything inside the pond was pretty much dead, or dead decaying matter. That's what we call eutrophication, and that's a eutrophied pond. Mostly due to runoff, which is another aspect of the nitrogen cycle from synthetic fertilizers and the Haber-Bosch process. Okay. So great, that's the nitrogen cycle for now. Make sure you study this well, the whole thing now. We've put it all into our notebook. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Study it well, we'll review it. We will have a test over this coming up. So this is Mr. Thomas signing off for now.